The steady beeping of the heart monitor filled the cold hospital room. The sharp scent of disinfectant stung Emily Carter's nose, making her feel nauseous. She sat on the hospital bed, gripping her phone tightly, her breaths coming in shallow gasps as pain clenched her abdomen. Noah and Ava, her 2-year-old twins, sat quietly in the corner, unaware of the gravity of the situation. The doctor had just informed her that she was suffering from severe internal bleeding and needed emergency surgery that very night, Christmas Eve. If the operation wasn't performed immediately, the consequences could be devastating. But as excruciating as the physical pain was, it paled in comparison to the agony of betrayal that cut through her chest like a blade. The video call was still open. On the screen, the faces of William Carter and Margaret Carter stared back at her. The twinkling lights from their Christmas tree reflected in her mother's eyes, but instead of concern, her face twisted into annoyance. "Don't you dare ask us to cancel our plans again." Margaret's voice rang through the hospital room, sharp enough to make Sophia, the nurse checking Emily's vitals, pause and glance over. Emily blinked, unable to believe what she was hearing. Her voice trembled, both from the pain and the sheer disbelief. "I have no one else to ask. I'm about to go into surgery, and the twins need someone to stay with them." But before she could finish, William interrupted. His tone clipped and irritated. "Emily, you're becoming a real nuisance. We're retired now. We deserve to enjoy our lives without being burdened by your constant problems." Burden. That word lodged itself deep in her heart, twisting like a knife. Emily's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. For the past 3 years, she had been sending her parents $2,500 every month to help with their mortgage and expenses after they chose early retirement. Even after Daniel, her husband, died in a car accident 6 months ago, she had continued supporting them, believing that family should always help each other. And yet, here she was in a life-threatening emergency, and they couldn't even be bothered to watch their own grandchildren for a few hours, because they had concert tickets. Emily's hands trembled as she fought back the tears. She couldn't believe it. These were her parents, the people who had raised her. "Please, just for one night. I'm not asking for much. Just a few hours while I'm in surgery. I have no one else." But instead of even a moment of hesitation or a sigh of reluctance, all she got was cold indifference. Finally, Margaret shook her head. "Ashley is hosting Christmas dinner tonight. The whole family will be there. We can't just not show up." Emily bit her lip so hard she tasted blood. Ashley, her younger sister, had always been the golden child. No matter what Emily achieved, she was always an afterthought. When she graduated with honors, her parents barely acknowledged it because Ashley had booked a small commercial role that same weekend. When Emily got married to Daniel, they complained about the wedding venue being too far from their home. When she gave birth to Noah and Ava, they visited once, and left after an hour saying the babies were too fussy. And yet, she had still believed that one day, they would put her first. A hot tear slipped down her cheek, and she quickly wiped it away, as if ashamed to show weakness to people who clearly had no empathy left for her. Sophia, the nurse, had been standing quietly nearby, watching the entire exchange. She gently placed a hand on Emily's shoulder, a small but comforting gesture. "I have a friend named Isabella. She's a professional nanny, experienced in caring for children with trauma. I can call her for you if you'd like." Emily turned to Sophia, her vision blurred with unshed tears. A stranger, a nurse she had just met, was offering more help than her own parents. A sharp pain surged through her abdomen, forcing her to lean forward and gasp for air. Everything around her blurred, but in that moment, she knew she had to make a decision. Her parents would never change. They had never prioritized her, never made her feel truly loved. And if she didn't survive this surgery, the thought of leaving Noah and Ava in their hands was more terrifying than dying itself. She swallowed hard, forcing the pain down. Her voice was shaky but firm. "Yes, please call her." And with those words, Emily began severing the toxic ties that had bound her to people who had never truly loved her. The video call was still connected. Margaret was saying something, maybe an excuse, maybe another dismissal, but Emily wasn't listening anymore. She had her answer. And for the first time in her life, she chose herself. The hospital room was dimly lit, the glow from the heart monitor casting faint shadows on the walls. Emily Carter lay still, exhaustion seeping into every fiber of her being. The physical pain from her internal bleeding was excruciating, but nothing compared to the cold, hollow ache in her chest. Her parents had abandoned her. Not in the literal sense, they were still very much alive, enjoying their fancy dinner party and their Elton John concert, but emotionally they had walked away from her a long time ago. The realization hit her with a force greater than any surgical incision. William and Margaret Carter had never truly been her parents. She had spent her entire life seeking their approval, bending over backward to be the good daughter, the one who sent them $2,500 every month so they could live comfortably in their early retirement. Even after Daniel's death, when her world had shattered into a million pieces, she had continued to provide for them, believing that family took care of each other. But that belief had been nothing more than a lie, she told herself. They had never taken care of her. They had never been there for her. And tonight, when she needed them the most, they had made their priorities clear. Not her. Never her. A fresh wave of pain coursed through her body, and she squeezed her eyes shut, willing herself to breathe through it. A gentle touch on her arm brought her back. It was Sophia, the kind nurse who had witnessed everything unfold. "Isabella is on her way," Sophia said softly, referring to the nanny she had contacted. "She'll be here soon to take care of Noah and Ava." Emily let out a shaky breath. A complete stranger had stepped up to help her when her own parents wouldn't. She turned her head toward the corner of the room, where Noah and Ava were curled up together, oblivious to the storm raging inside their mother. They were the reason she had to make a change. She wouldn't let them grow up believing that love was conditional, that they had to earn it, the way she had spent her whole life trying to earn hers. She reached out her trembling hand. "Sophia, my phone." The nurse handed it to her without hesitation. Emily unlocked it, her fingers unsteady as she navigated to her banking app. Her eyes landed on the upcoming scheduled transfer, another $2,500 set to be deposited into her parents' account in just a few days. No more. With one deep breath, she canceled the transfer. A small, almost imperceptible spark of relief flickered inside her. But she wasn't done yet. She navigated to her messaging app and stared at the last message from her father, still visible on the screen. "You're becoming a real nuisance, Emily. We deserve to enjoy our retirement without your constant problems." Her vision blurred. Not from tears. She had already cried too much tonight. This was something different. Anger. Resolution. Clarity. She began typing, each keystroke punctuated by the rapid beating of her heart. "I will no longer be providing financial support. My children and I deserve better than being your afterthoughts. Do not contact me again." She hovered her finger over the send button. A voice inside her whispered, "Are you sure?" But another, stronger voice, one she hadn't heard in years, answered back. She pressed send. A finality settled over her as she watched the message deliver. For the first time in her life, she had chosen herself. The next morning, Emily woke up to the dull ache in her abdomen and the unfamiliar sensation of lightness in her chest. She had spent years carrying the weight of her parents' expectations, their demands, their relentless taking. Now, that weight was gone. Sophia entered the room, smiling warmly. "Good morning. How are you feeling?" Emily took a deep breath, then exhaled. Different. For the first time in years, she wasn't waking up to the overwhelming dread of an upcoming bill her parents couldn't afford, or another guilt-tripping phone call about how she wasn't doing enough. She was free. Then the phone vibrated. She hesitated before picking it up. As expected, there were several missed calls and messages, all from her parents. Her father's first message was almost laughable in its predictability. "You can't just cut us off like this. We have a cruise plan next month, and the tickets are non-refundable." Her mother's was more dramatic. "Emily, we raised you. After everything we've done for you, You're just going to abandon us. Then came the guilt tripping. We might lose the house, you know. After all our sacrifices, how can you be so selfish? Selfish. A bitter smile tugged at the corner of Emily's lips. They had refused to watch their own grandchildren while she was undergoing life-saving surgery. But she was the selfish one. She locked her phone and set it aside. Let them panic. Let them scramble. Let them finally feel the consequences of their own actions. Later that afternoon, her phone vibrated again. This time, the message wasn't from her parents. It was from Ashley. Mom and Dad just told me you were having a minor procedure. Why are they freaking out about money? What's going on? Emily's breath hitched. So they had lied to Ashley too. Course they had. It was always the same with them. Manipulation, control, rewriting reality to make themselves look like the victims. For a moment, Emily debated what to say. Should she bother? Would it even make a difference? Then she remembered the look on Noah and Ava's faces last night. This was bigger than her. She began typing. Slowly at first, then faster, pouring everything out. The emergency surgery, the desperate plea for help, the concert tickets that mattered more than their own daughter's life. A minute passed. Then another. Finally a reply. Oh my God, Emily. Had no idea. They told me you were just being dramatic about a routine checkup. If I had known, I would have watched the twins. I'm so sorry. Emily closed her eyes. Maybe Ashley wasn't just another extension of their parents. Maybe there was still hope for her. She wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was certain. She would never again sacrifice herself for people who saw her as nothing more than a source of income. That chapter of her life was over. The hospital room remained silent, except for the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor and the soft breathing of Noah and Ava, curled up on the small bed beside their mother. Emily Carter slowly opened her eyes, squinting against the harsh white light from the overhead lamp. The first thing she felt wasn't the dull ache from her surgery. It was the emptiness in her heart. She had done something she never thought she had the courage to do. Cut off her parents. No more controlling phone calls, no more guilt-laced messages demanding money, no more weight of their emotional manipulation pressing down on her every single day. But in exchange, she felt a quiet sadness settle in. Even though she knew they had never truly cared for her, even though she had expected nothing from them, a small part of her had still hoped for regret, for remorse. Her phone sat untouched on the bedside table, silent and unmoving. She didn't need to check it to know that if her parents had messaged her, it wouldn't be to ask about her health. A warm hand gently touched her shoulder. "You're awake," came the soft voice. It was Sophia, the nurse who had witnessed everything, from the moment Emily's parents abandoned her over a video call, to the moment she made the bravest decision of her life. Emily blinked, trying to smile, but a sharp pain in her abdomen made her wince. "How are the kids?" Her voice was weak, but the concern in her eyes was unwavering. Sophia glanced toward the twins, still sleeping peacefully. "Isabella has been amazing. She stayed with them all night, made sure they ate, bathed and got plenty of rest. Ava even held your hand while you slept." Something warm swelled in Emily's chest. Isabella, a woman she had never met before last night, had cared for her children with the kind of kindness that their own grandparents never could. "Is she still here?" Emily asked. "Yeah, she's just outside grabbing coffee. She said she won't leave until you're fully recovered." Emily stared at the ceiling, feeling a strange mix of gratitude and disbelief. Why was a stranger doing so much for her? Why was Isabella willing to stay by her side, while her own parents had so easily discarded her? Her phone vibrated lightly. She knew she should ignore it, but curiosity got the better of her. Unlocking the screen, she saw 27 missed calls from a familiar number. Her parents. Along with the calls were a string of text messages, none of them asking about her well-being. Instead, they all revolved around money. "You can't do this to us. How are we supposed to survive without your help? Did you even think about how this will affect us financially? We have a cruise next month. Are you really going to ruin our plans?" Emily felt a strange sense of calm settle over her. If this had been a year ago, she would have spiraled into guilt. But now she felt nothing. They didn't ask if she had survived the surgery. They didn't ask if their grandchildren were okay. They only cared about what they had lost when she cut them off. Then another message appeared. This one was different. Ashley, Mom and Dad told me you were just overreacting to a routine checkup. Why are they freaking out about money? What's going on? Emily froze. They had lied to Ashley too. Of course they had. That's what they did. Twist the truth, manipulate, control. Always painting themselves as the victims. For a moment, she debated whether to respond. Would it even matter? Would Ashley believe her? But then she thought of Noah and Ava, of the way her parents had so easily dismissed them, just as they had always dismissed her. Well, Ashley needed to know the truth. She started typing, her fingers shaky at first, then faster as she poured everything out. The emergency surgery, the desperate plea for help, the concert tickets that mattered more to their parents than their own daughter's life. Minutes passed. Then another. Finally a reply. Oh my God, Emily. Had no idea. They told me you were just being dramatic. If I had known, I would have watched the twins. I'm so sorry. Emily exhaled slowly. Maybe Ashley wasn't like their parents. Maybe she had been blind to the truth for years, just like Emily once was. Maybe she had a chance to see them for who they really were. Emily didn't know what this meant for their relationship going forward. But at least, Ashley hadn't turned her back on her. A moment later, Isabella walked in, a fresh cup of coffee in her hand. She smiled when she saw Emily awake. Next time if you ever need help, don't wait until you have no other options, okay? Emily stared at the woman in front of her, feeling something shift inside her. For so long she had believed that family meant blood ties, that she had to hold on to her parents, no matter how much they hurt her. But now she understood something she had never dared to believe before. Family isn't defined by blood. Family is the people who stay. The ones who show up. The ones who care not out of obligation but because they choose to. And looking at Isabella, Sophia, and even Ashley, Emily knew one thing for sure. She wasn't alone. She had lost her parents, but she had gained people who truly cared. She had let go of a painful past, and in return, she had found a new future, one filled with freedom, peace, and a love that was real. She was never going back to the way things were. 3 weeks after leaving the hospital, Emily Carter felt her body slowly recovering, but her life had completely changed. She no longer worried about the $2,500 automatically withdrawn from her account every month for her parents. No more pleading phone calls. No more guilt-tripping messages. It was just her, Noah, and Ava, and for the first time, a future that was truly her own. But the peace didn't last long. One afternoon, as Emily sat on the couch watching Noah and Ava play with their building blocks, the doorbell rang. She felt her stomach tighten. She had known this moment was coming. Walking to the door, she peered through the peephole, and unsurprisingly, William and Margaret Carter stood outside. Her mother clutched her designer handbag to her chest, eyes tense with worry. Her father stood beside her, arms crossed, looking frustrated yet anxious. Emily took a deep breath, then opened the door. Just enough to see them, but not enough to invite them in. "We need to talk," her father said, his voice firm but urgent. Emily met his gaze, calmer than she expected. "About what?" "About our financial situation," her mother interjected, her tone laced with resentment. "We've come to rely on the money you send us. Cutting us off like that has thrown everything into chaos." A flicker of anger stirred inside Emily. "Chaos? That money was meant to help you transition into early retirement," she said evenly, voice carefully measured. "It was never supposed to be a lifetime obligation." Her father scoffed. "We built our financial plans around your support. If you keep being this stubborn, we're going to lose the house." Emily could barely believe what she was hearing. She had almost died, and they were worried about their house. She crossed her arms, keeping her voice steady. "Sell the boat." Her mother immediately protested. "We'd take a huge loss." Emily let out a dry laugh. "Then sell the timeshare." Her father frowned. The market is terrible right now. We tried, but no buyers. Then why did you buy it in the first place? Emily asked, her voice sharper now. Silence. They had no good answer. Emily, we didn't come here to argue, her mother finally said, her voice softening, taking on a more pleading tone. We just need your help this one time. We need $144,000 to catch up on our payments. After that, everything will be fine. Emily nearly laughed. Did they really think she was just going to write them a check and let them go back to their lavish lifestyle that they couldn't afford? No, she said firmly. Her mother's eyes widened. You can't just abandon your family like this. Emily didn't flinch. Oh, you mean like how you abandoned me on Christmas Eve? When I was in the hospital, terrified, not knowing if I'd survive. When I was begging you to watch my kids for just one night. Like that. Her mother opened her mouth, but before she could speak, her father cut in. We made one mistake, but you can't use that to punish us forever. Emily let out a hollow laugh. This isn't punishment. This is consequence. Just then, Ava wandered sleepily into the living room, clutching her stuffed giraffe. When she saw the strangers at the door, she froze, then quickly ran to her mother's side, hiding behind her legs. Her mother's demeanor shifted instantly. Oh, my precious granddaughter, Margaret cooed, her voice suddenly dripping with affection. Grandma brought presents for you. But Ava didn't move. Her big, curious eyes flicked up to her mother, uncertainty written all over her face, as if sensing that something wasn't right. Emily gently placed a protective hand on her daughter's shoulder and met her parents' gaze. I think you should leave. Her mother tried again. Emily, we're just trying to do what's best for the family. Emily's voice remained calm but unwavering. No, you're trying to do what's best for yourselves. And with that, she closed the door, ending the conversation. A week later, she received a text from Ashley. Hey, they lost the house. They're freaking out. Emily stared at the message for a long moment. They had treated her like an ATM, assuming she would always be there to clean up their mess. But now, for the first time, they had to face the reality they had created. Ashley sent another message. I'm not saying you have to help them. I just thought you should know what's happening. Emily sighed, but for the first time, she didn't feel the familiar pang of guilt. She was no longer the desperate daughter seeking their approval. She was no longer the person who put their needs above her own. She had freed herself. She had chosen to protect Noah and Ava, instead of protecting the people who had never truly protected her. And for the first time in her life, she had no regrets. A year after Emily Carter made the decision to cut off her parents, her life had completely changed. She was no longer bound by the financial strain of sending them $2,500 a month, no longer burdened by their manipulative phone calls. Her life, while still full of challenges, was finally her own. She had sold her old apartment and moved to a smaller house in a quiet neighborhood where Noah and Ava could run and play freely. Isabella was still their nanny, not just helping with childcare but becoming a true friend. The family she once knew had faded away. But in their place, she had found people who truly deserved her love and trust. One afternoon, while Noah and Ava played in the yard, Emily received a handwritten letter. She stared at the sender's name on the envelope. Margaret Carter. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. A part of her wanted to throw it away without reading it, but another part urged her to see what it said. To her surprise, it was nothing like the angry, guilt-laden messages she had come to expect from her mother. Emily, I've had a lot of time to think. And I know that what I'm about to say may be too late, but I need to say it anyway. I'm sorry. Emily froze. An apology. She quickly scanned the rest of the letter, her heartbeat slowing as she read. I was wrong. I took your support for granted without ever stopping to think about how it made you feel. Watching you build a life without us has forced me to confront a painful truth. I was never really there for you. For the first time in her life, her mother acknowledged her mistakes. I was jealous of your independence. I resented that you didn't need me the way I needed my own mother. But now I see that you did need me, just not in the ways I wanted to be needed. And when you reached out for help, I turned my back. I will regret that for the rest of my life." Emily felt something inside her shift. For so many years, she had longed for these words. But was it too late? Your father is changing too. Losing everything forced him to face the truth about how we treated you. He doesn't express emotions well, but I know he regrets it just as much as I do. I don't expect forgiveness overnight. I only hope that one day you might give us a chance to make things right." Emily set the letter down, her thoughts racing. For the first time, her mother wasn't demanding, wasn't manipulating, wasn't blaming her. She was simply apologizing. A few months later, Emily decided to meet with her parents, but on her own terms. She chose a small cafe, not their house, not her house, a neutral place. When William and Margaret Carter walked in, she barely recognized them. Her father, once proud and authoritative, looked smaller somehow. Her mother, always dressed in designer clothes, now wore something simple and modest, her face no longer carrying the same air of superiority. No one spoke at first. They simply looked at each other in a tense, heavy silence. Finally, her father spoke first. "I was a terrible father." Emily hadn't expected that. Her father had never been one to admit mistakes. "I always believed I had the right to demand your help, without ever asking myself if I deserved it. And I was wrong." Her mother nodded. "I don't expect immediate forgiveness. But if there's any chance that we could start again, I would cherish it." Emily took a deep breath. Had they really changed? Or was this just another act? She couldn't be sure. But there was one thing she did know. She wasn't the same woman she used to be. If you truly want a second chance, it won't be through words, it will be through actions, Emily said calmly. Noah and Ava will only have grandparents if you prove that you deserve that role. Her parents nodded. There was no anger, no argument, just acceptance. As Emily walked away from the cafe that day, she felt an unexpected sense of peace. She didn't know if her parents had truly changed, but that no longer mattered. What mattered was that she had changed. She had learned to set boundaries, to protect herself and her children, and most importantly, to stop seeking validation from people who never gave it freely. Would she ever fully forgive them? Maybe. Maybe not. But either way, she had stepped out of the shadows of her past and into a life she built on her own terms. She had lost a family. But in the process, she had found herself. And for her, that was the greatest victory of all.